Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting optic, if I can even fit this in the screen at one time. This is the Vector Continental 3-24. So keep that in mind going forward. Now, getting into the specifics of this scope, once again, this is the Vector Continental 3-24. So their Continental line of scopes is basically their top tier line. If you're not familiar with Vector Optics, they are an overseas manufacturer of optics that also owns partial stake in German shot glass. So their Continental line, being their top tier scopes, come with German glass, German shot glass, which is widely regarded as the best glass on the planet. Now, that being said, they are using Chinese hardware with German glass, so it is an interesting combination that saves you a ton of money while getting you the best glass possible, which we'll get into all of that a little bit later on. Now, very importantly, 3-24 is an immense magnification range because this is part of their X8 lineup. So, of course, 3-24, 4-32, so on and so forth. Now, also important about this scope is they have two different versions of this exact same scope. They have the tactical model and they have the hunting model. Now, this model specifically is the hunting model, which will have some downsides. I think most of you would probably be interested in the tactical version, which we'll get into both of them because, again, they're the exact same scope with really only two changes. That's going to be the turrets and the reticle. For some people, the hunting will make sense in a hunting application, but probably for most people, the tactical makes more sense, at least if you're watching this channel. Now, we might as well start out with size and weight and the exterior functions of the optic. So what we have here is an optic body that is 14.8 inches long, so it's very long. And then I have the additional 3-inch sunshade on the end, so it's a very long optic. Now, the weight for the hunting version comes in at 26 ounces, which is not too bad for, again, a scope of this magnification range and size. The tactical version is 2 ounces heavier because it has much larger aluminum turrets. Now, the body of the optic is, of course, a 30mm monotube, 56mm objective lens, so it has a very large objective for good light transmission, which with the German glass, they say that it approaches 93% light transmission, which, if you know anything about glass, is basically as close to perfect as it can be. Now, very importantly, while the main body is 60-61, all of your turrets and adjustments are all 70-75, which is, again, a good step up. Usually 70-75 is about 2 times the strength to weight ratio of 60-61, so 70-75 is a good step up in terms of, again, strength. Now, moving on to the center of the optic, this is, again, where the tactical version and the hunting version are going to differ greatly. On the hunting version that you see here, we have either capped windage and elevation, but it also does come with a additional knob that you can throw on to the, really either one, really, but most of you are probably going to put it on the elevation. However, very interestingly, this taller knob that is not capped doesn't have any markings on it. So I'm not sure what you would use it for. I did have it on there for a little bit, and then after a while, I just went ahead and used the cap turret. I actually zeroed out the turret underneath. So when I am using this optic at distance, I actually use the small turret to dial with. It feels just fine. The clicks on here are in quarter MOA increments, which are more than precise enough for, again, the hunting style application. Now, on the left-hand side of the optic, we have, of course, our parallax adjustment from, I believe, how low does that go? All the way down to 20 yards, and then, of course, out to infinity. Now, even further out, we have our battery tray and our rotary dial. Now, the optic has a center floating dot, and that is the only part that gets illuminated. I believe at 24x magnification, it's like a half MOA, so it is very precise at the higher end magnification ranges. However, again, this is a second focal plane reticle, so if you're using it at a lower magnification, it is going to appear a little bit larger. Now, on the illumination dial itself, it does have 6 settings with an off in between each one. So if you like to use a specific setting, you have just one turn in either direction will turn it off, because again, this isn't like auto on, auto off, and the battery life probably isn't all that great. It hasn't died yet, and I've had this for several months, so which is a nice thing. Now, on setting 6, the only thing that illuminates is going to be that center dot. It does get very bright, not quite daylight bright like what you're going to get with some sort of fiber optic illumination on certain other scopes, but this is very bright, just not like red dot, fire hot bright. You're still going to be able to see it during the daytime. It's going to provide some good contrast in, like, you know, dark backgrounds or whatnot, depending on how you're shooting. So for a hunting scope, it again makes a lot of sense. Now on the tactical version of this scope, it actually comes with very large exposed windage and elevation that are zero resettable, and on top of that they have a zero reset function as well as tactile indicators based upon your revolution. So if you're dialing up quite a few mils on your turrets, they have tactical, so you can tell basically what set of revolutions you're on, and then you can always dial back to your zero stop. Now on the tactical version, they are 0.1 mil increments versus quarter MOA, because this optic, the hunting version of the optic, has a BDC reticle. The tactical version has a mil grid, so your turrets are in 0.1 mil increments, which again makes a lot of sense, so it's easier to translate within that grid. Now moving back from there, you of course have your magnification ring, which is very quick and smooth. It does have a bit of a long throw. Doesn't have any like crazy throw lever or anything onto it. The machining on it is very aggressive and it is very smooth. And again, you do have magnification all the way from 3 to 24x. So it is usable in basically every scenario out there. Now, moving on to another area where this scope does very well is going to be its eye relief and its eye box. So they quote on the website like a 3.7 inch constant eye relief. Now, of course, usually, honestly, it's a little bit better than that. At 3x magnification, you're going to get anywhere from like 2 to 7 inches of a usable eye relief, and the eye box is going to be very forgiving as well. So your up, down, left, and right is going to be pretty darn good at 3x. Now at 24x, it does of course tighten up quite a bit, but it is still certainly usable, and your eye box is very tight as well. You get a little bit of forward and a little bit of back, but really, of course, at that 24x magnification, really tightens up quite a bit. Usually when I was using it, I was anywhere from like 12 to 18, since I was only ever shooting out to like 600 yards, so I didn't need that 24x magnification, and usually I would prefer to have a little bit more forgiving eye relief and eye box. Now, something that is very important to me on basically any magnified optic that does not have a approximate 1x setting like an LPVO is going to be field of view. Now, this optic at 3x magnification has a field of view of 41 feet, and you can definitely tell when looking through the optic. The field of view, again, at 3x magnification of 41 feet would be approximate to 123 feet at 1x on an LPVO, and anything above 120 feet for me is top tier phenomenal. That is going to be more than most of your ACOGs, more than most of your other optics that have well-renowned field of view. This is going to beat most of them. There's only a couple scopes on the market that have a better field of view than this one does. So again, when you see through it at 3x, you see quite a bit. It is a very, very nice looking image as well with that German glass, which we'll get into in just a minute. And you have a phenomenal field of view combined with a good eye box, good eye relief, means that it is very, very nice to use. And I am, again, a big fan of field of view because, of course, you get to see more through the optic at all magnification ranges. So, of course, that high-end field of view at 3x is still going to be paying off all the way at 24x, which for a hunting or tactical style scope, you get more of that magnified image, more of what you're paying for. Now, moving on to the reticle. The reticle in the hunting scope is very simplistic. You basically have, again, that very precise floating dot that illuminates in the center, and then you have a BDC down below, which is, I believe, in 5 MOA increments at 20x magnification. It has a little bit of a weird setup in that regard, but for a hunting scope where you're going to be doing 99% of your shooting inside of 300 yards, and then maybe a few percentage points beyond that, most of the time that very, very simple reticle with that very bright illumination, again, not perfectly bright illumination, but that good illumination is going to allow you to pick up a target quickly and take your, in most cases, single shot. Again, with that very nice field of view means that you can see a ton through the optic. Now, on the tactical version, the reticle that you get is a fairly standard middle grid Christmas tree style reticle, which I prefer for, target shooting or distance shooting. But again, if you're a more professional user as well, you can do a lot of cool things with mill grids that my tiny 8 brain can't understand. So again, for most people, the tactical version is probably the one to go for, and the hunting one is going to be, well, relegated towards specifically hunting. Now, this one here, the reticle is perfectly fine. When I was taking shots at distance, I preferred to actually just dial rather than use the BDC, because the BDC is actually married to 20x magnification, not 24. And if I was at any other, again, different magnification level, I would rather just dial rather than just holding off into space, and that made more sense to me. Though again, with the hunting version, you just have capped windage and elevation, or that weird blank knob that you can also use. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about on the scope that I've already mentioned a couple times is going to be the glass quality. And it's fantastic. Now, the only scope out there that I've seen with better light transmission clarity is going to be the SCOL-50 However, that was a $5,000 optic, $6,000 optic, and that did have better glass, just maybe due to the construction, the prescription of the glass, or the coatings as well, because that might be one of the areas where Vector is cheaping out a little bit. And speaking of cheap, with the German glass and the feature set that you can get with the tactical version, which I think is going to be the more preferred version, you're looking at a price tag of $750, which is pretty darn cheap, if not the cheapest possible scope that you can get with German glass. So as far as value goes, the hunting scope is going to be very niche, and the hunting scope is actually $50 cheaper than the tactical version, but the tactical version, of course, has the better reticle and the better turrets, more set up for, again, long-range, tactical style of shooting, whatever you guys want to call it. So for most people, the tactical version, which again comes in at $750, is going to be the scope to get. Now, $750 is not cheap. That is actually more than I have ever spent on an optic. The only optic that I've spent close to that much money on is the SIG Romeo 8T. However, I'm a dealer and I get dealer pricing on those optics, so I didn't pay MSRP on that. But $750 is not cheap for an optic. However, it is insanely cheap for an optic with German glass. Now, again, the hunting scope is pretty niche. It doesn't really have the feature set that most people are going to be looking for. They want the nice turrets. They want the nice Christmas tree reticle, which you're going to get in the tactical version. So for most people, again, $750 for a really good feature set, phenomenal glass, phenomenal field of view, decent eye relief, eye box, all that sort of stuff, with a package that's not insanely heavy. Again, 28 ounces for the tactical version. Without the sunshade, you're going to be pushing 30 ounces with the sunshade. It's not insane. It's not lightweight either. But again, really unbeatable value. Now, the only problem for me personally with this optic, and it's not really a fault of the optic, it's just that this is a 3-24 optic, and I don't really need a 3-24 optic. Again, shooting in Western Washington beyond 600 yards becomes very difficult very quickly. There's a few places where I can stretch out to around 1,000 yards, but then I don't really have a gun that's going to be all that consistent out of 1,000 yards anyways. But for you, if you are looking for an optic kind of in that mid-range price category under $800, you're looking for the best glass that you can possibly get. Nice turrets, good reticle. The Christmas tree reticle is fairly standard, but it does work very well. It is something that I do personally like. It's very hard to say no to it for, again, the exceptional performance, exceptional glass, and the price to performance, which is probably the best of any long-range scope out there. There are better long-range scopes, but you're going to pay at least 3 times the money for probably the next step up in performance. So again, if you happen to be one of those people looking for, hey, what's the best long-range scope? What's the most performance I can get for under $800? Well, this is one of those weird categories where I don't even know if the Vector Continental lineup in general has any competition in that regards when price is a factor. If price isn't a factor, then of course, there are different scopes to go for with all sorts of advanced features that some of you nerds might need. But for the average Joe looking to spend as little money as possible and get as much performance as possible, well, again, I don't know if there is another option other than the Vector Continental, especially given that you're getting really high-quality German glass. Now, keep in mind that I am not a professional distance shooter. In fact, I'm quite a novice in that regard, so there are definitely people out there that are going to be much more knowledgeable in that regard, and maybe there's something I'm missing, some feature that this doesn't have that somebody else needs for, again, their long-distance shooting application. But with my time with it, again, using the optic is incredibly nice with that very nice field of view. Fantastic glass, very simple reticle. Again, the hunting version is a little niche and it's going to not be for everyone. The tactical version is going to be much more usable for the average person, going to have the features that they want in their, long-range tactical optic or whatever you want to call it. But with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of the Vector Continental 3-24 in the comments down below. If there is any competition to this optic in this, let's say, sub $1,000 price category, even though this is, again, about $750 and probably even cheaper if you can find a discount code for it. But with all of that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. Once again, let me know what you guys think of this in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Peace off.